Today we're talking about this one, Megamorphs 3, Elfangor's Secret. Love the front cover, by the way. Nice and shiny. Before we get into the main thrust of this book, I think this is the perfect book to start off with a tangential message. And that is, it's an important one, right? So, away with the silly japes for now. This book deals a lot with war. And not just the Andalite Yeerk War, human Yeerk War that we've got going on now, but actual wars that happened. And it brings up a lot of points about the harsh reality of war. And it is an awful thing. An absolutely awful, but oftentimes essential and necessary thing. But the people that go through these wars suffer. And not just during the wars, but after the wars. There are a lot of military veterans out there who are struggling. I know a lot of them because I work with them. And they go through a lot. And some of the stories that they tell you puts into perspective how horrible war situations can be. Stuff that you wouldn't even have imagined. Stuff that they won't put in the movies. Just horrible, horrible things. And it lives on with them. PTSD, survivor's guilt. You know, survivor's guilt where you chastise yourself for surviving when all your peers died. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. And those people are still around today. And there are still wars going on today where people will come out of them with PTSD and all those other horrible afflictions. So I just want to take this moment at the start of this review just to tell you about that and to urge you to look into your local veterans charities. They're incredibly important. There are a lot of them around. I'm assuming they are in the UK. I'm assuming in America they have a lot of these veterans charities as well. But they do stunning work in trying to counter mental health issues of military veterans. So please look into your local veterans charity. And if you feel so inclined to do so, please help them in whatever way you can. It can be the simplest little thing. You could even just retweet a message on Twitter just to spread the word, because it is a serious issue and one that affects a surprising amount of people. And it is horrible to see some of the stuff that they are going through. So please take that into consideration after you watch this review. So that's the initial message. Let's get into the book, okay? Start the review now. Elfangor's Secret. Oh my hecking God. What a book! Ladies and gentlemen, what a book! This thing is awesome. And I am not being facetious. I am genuinely in shock about how great this book was. I didn't expect it to be as good as it is, but this thing is just fantastic. 208 pages. My notes, which I put on my computer, there are 2 bullet points, and they're not even really errors, really. This, I couldn't find a flaw in this book, really. I couldn't. Wow, what? Let's just go through the plot, shall we? So we start off with a prologue where we look at Elfangor and we talk about the time matrix, which turns out is buried in the construction site, which explains why he came to the Animorphs location and why he was so close to Tobias, his son, technically, when he landed. We're given a pretty nifty explanation for that. It's no longer down to pure chance that he would land in the construction site where his son was. There's a more valid explanation for that happening, which I'm happy about. You remember my review of the Andalite Chronicles, obviously split into 3 parts, and how I feel it is a complete letdown of a book. It broke canon, it just destroyed the lore of a lot of the Animorphs. But I'm now thankful for it because it's essentially brought this book around. It's a time matrix heavy book. My washing machine is really loud today. Apologies if you can hear my washing machine in the background. I don't know why I've decided to do it tonight. So we get into the first chapter and we're joining Tobias. And it's a strange chapter because it just jumps straight into this situation. We're not messing around with like introducing the characters as they are. we're introduced into a very strange situation, and the first clue that something strange is going on is that Tobias talks about Melissa as part of the Animorphs team, and I'm thinking, okay, that's unusual. And as these first couple of chapters progress, it starts to dawn on you that something really isn't right with the Animorphs. For one thing, Cassie has a slave, which was not previously established in the 28 or so books prior to this one. That wasn't established, so I read that and thought, right, I see what's going on here with shenanigans. Something's going on here. But not only that, but there's a lot of stuff going on there talking about how the military is going into the Amazon to get rid of the primitives. Why they're doing that, we're not sure. But they're trying to put into perspective that the Animorphs in this new reality, what's going on, are this strange, backward, horrible group of people. I mean, there's this whole thing where Jake is looking at Cassie and saying, you look like you have radical ideas that are against this system. You know, you're a traitor to the system we live in. I'm thinking I will have to report you to, get this, the Triple S. I love that little throw in there. And Jake is called Supreme Leader Jake, which is odd, but amusing. Very amusing. And I really appreciated the first couple of chapters in this book. We're thrown right in there. We're given this bizarre scenario and we're left wondering what the hell is going on here. The Droid shows up. Now, we've discussed the Droid before. He appeared in book 27, The Exposed. And I had a little theory that he's a chi trick. Because you know about me and the chi if you've been watching these reviews. You know about me and the chi and our history. And he comes down saying he's a messenger from Kryak. And there's this thing going on with the Ellimist and Kryak. He explains, well, first of all, he turns the Animorphs back into how we know them. And they're like, what did I have a slave? Rachel appears in place of Melissa. And she's like, where the frick was I? And the Droid explains, I've turned you back to your proper selves. What's happened is Visser Four, who was Visser Four, has found the time matrix. He's in the body of a man called John Berryman. And I don't remember how he explained that he'd found the time matrix. I suppose in a way, this part here is sort of a flaw, but we'll cover that in the end where stuff is revealed. But Visser Four, in his new host, has found the time matrix. Visser Four, if you remember, was in book 18. He wasn't in book 18, but he was around the area where they went to the planet Lyra. And Visser Four apparently survived the explosion of the entire supercontinent, but he got demoted. And now he is just another Yeerk. But he's stumbled across the time matrix and he's travelling back in time to try to change human history so that they're easier for the Yeerks to conquer. And hence he'll, I don't know, get a promotion again. Turn into Visser 2. Because who the hell Visser 2 is? I don't think they ever appear. Off somewhere doing shit all. Droid says that the Ellimist and Kryak both don't like the fact that this simple Yeerk has control of what probably the most powerful technological machinery in the entire universe. And so they say, okay, we hate each other, but neither of us wants this guy doing this. So send in the Animorphs, send in the squadron to sort this problem out so we can continue with a very fair chess game. How does that sound? Which is very odd. And it's strange that it was the Droid that came to the Animorphs talking about this and not the Ellimist. Does that not seem strange to anybody else that the Ellimist didn't show up to the Animorphs, considering that's his usual thing? And the Animorphs are more likely to trust what the Ellimist is saying? Why is the Droid there? Why not Kryak? Why is Droid doing all Kryak's dirty work? Achoo. Achoo. Not achoo. 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 But that's a theory for another day. Part of the deal, though, which is very strange, because the Elmis and Crayak are having this deal. So Elmis says, we'll do this thing. Crayak says, okay, but only if one of the Animorphs dies. And this is obviously a tense moment for the Animorphs. They're saying, okay, so you want us to rid you of this problem, but one of us will die in the process. And there's an argument about, do we really want to do this? We don't want to lose one of us, but at the same time, look at what the new reality is. Do we really want that? We need to do this for the sake of the human race. And Marco sticks up with the negative argument that he's the naysayer, saying we shouldn't be doing this rubbish. We shouldn't be getting involved in this mess. But he's doing it. It's implied that he's doing it to protect Jake, because he knows that Jake will be the one to volunteer to take the fall. So Marco's protecting Jake. Nice to see. But they all sort of agree, and then flash, they're in the past. Where in the past? Agincourt. That's right, the battle between the English and the French, Henry V. What happened in real time, and I assume what happened in this battle as well, is that the English were heavily outnumbered, but they overcame the French. Excuse me a moment. Get in, you Brits! Get in, yes, but you French bastards. So they enter the Battle of Agincourt. And they're thrust in front of these knights, and they start having a bit of a scuffle. Apparently the Animorphs aren't just placed in the same place, they're sort of spread out, which is strange, very strange. But Cassie and Rachel are there, and they start to morph to fend off these knights that are trying to essentially kill them. And then the Animorphs come, these knights will go away, and the Animorphs decide, right, we need to find where this Visser Four bloke is. So they start to search the area. And they decide to look for a guy because, let me start that sentence again. Seeing that all the people at Agincourt are just ridden with disease and what have you, they decide that they've got to look for a guy who's clean face, somebody with straight teeth, somebody with youthful looks and energy. So they spend the night and the morning looking for this guy, and they eventually find him. And he's one of the archers on the British side. And then the battle starts, and things get rather tense. I've really thought that the scenes in this book were incredibly tense. Sometimes Animorphs fails at providing tension. Most of the time it works, but sometimes it doesn't. Throughout this book, the tension is there. Every time it wants tension, it's there. And they do a smashing job of writing this. This, by the way, is the original authors. I forgot to mention this. This is not a ghost-written book. It is the original authors back from their brief holiday. And the battle starts. But there's a big problem because, and this is on Jake, this is definitely on Jake. You've got a battle, you've got archers, you've got the space in between these armies. What are the archers going to do? Shoot up at a trajectory. So the space in the air between those should be off limits. And Jake had a whole day, essentially, to think of this. Or even Marco, or Cassie. The ones that are supposed to be, essentially, the smart ones. Not to discredit the others, but they're the smart ones when it comes to these sorts of situations. But Jake doesn't take this into account, and the Animorphs are flying in the middle of this battlefield when the archers start firing. And things start to go a bit topsy-turvy, if you know what I'm talking about. Marco falls. And Rachel comes after, and she gets hit as well. These two armies are now engaging. But Cassie has thought ahead and morphed to horse. But she's too late, and she gets downed. So this fight comes together. Cassie is there on the ground as a horse, and the two birds of prey, which is Rachel and Marco, if I remember correctly, are hiding beneath this horse for safety. John Berryman, aka ex-Visser Four, we just call him Visser Four, even though technically he was demoted, so what have you. He's going to be aiming at Henry V, and Axe is tasked to stop him. And again, this is a pivotal moment here because Jake he's seen the injured ones on the ground in the midst of this battle. But he isn't worried about that. He knows his priority, and he says we need to go for Visser Four, and sends Axe on the way. Tobias is annoyed at this. But and he shows somewhat of a bit of insubordination. But Axe is tasked to go for Visser Four, and he intercepts an arrow, effectively saving Henry V. Meanwhile, Tobias has gone down to the ground and decided to morph Hawkbajir. Jake goes down with him, morphs into a horse. I believe it was Jake. I'm sort of getting muddled on where each of the characters are, but it's definitely Tobias in Hawkbajir morph, riding into battle on Jake, I believe, on a horse. And what a tremendous scene that is. That doesn't get brought up enough in Animorphs fandom. The scene of a Hawkbajir riding into Agincourt on the back of a noble steed. And I thought it was excellent. And it disperses the crowd for long enough for Cassie to come out. Meanwhile, Axe is following Visser Four, who's now running to a village, and he gets to a church. And he can't get in, but he starts to demorph on the steps of this church. The villagers in the area start prodding at Axe and sort of, oh, what the frick are you supposed to be, mate? And Jake and Tobias arrive just in time, riding through. And then Tobias and Axe, Tobias as Hawkbajir, run after Visser Four. And they go into this church, and there's a priest there, and he's looking at, oh, what the hell's going on here? What are these demons? And this is one of the things that's on my notes. There's a big gong, bong bong, church bells. And Jake's outside and he says, church bells, Visser Four is in the church tower. Now, it's either one of two things. One, how does Jake know that because there was a gong that John Berryman is in the church tower? Or two, maybe he did know because of the gong, but why then did John Berryman ring the bell to announce his position to the world? I mean, it's a minor point, but it did seem a bit weird. But it's pretty much inconsequential. So Tobias and Axe go up the stairs to find this guy, and he's got the time matrix, which is this big sphere, we've talked about it before. Big white sphere thing. And he vanishes. He goes. And now they're in a new place, because what's happened is the Elmist and Craig, the Droid apparently, said that wherever he goes, you go. So now that Chappie, Visser Four, has zoomed forward to another part in time, the Animorphs gradually follow. Where do they end up now? The crossing of the Delaware. Now, I'm not so much into my American history, but the book provides a good enough example of what's going on. They're on the side of George Washington. They're all saying, look, it's Big George, my hero. The guy who brought the country from the ground into the ether or whatever. There's quite a humorous little bit where Marco finds George Washington's spare shoes. I don't know how, but I appreciate the little gimmick thrown in there. But the other Animorphs are sprouting up here, there and everywhere. Cassie has morphed Dolphin. I don't know how she expects that's going to help, but she goes into the water, into the river. Axe and Tobias have emerged on the other side of the river, and they say there's these bunch of blokes over here. Who knows why they're here? They don't know where Visser Four is. Jake and Marco are getting into the boats. They're just human. They're just coming along for the ride. And they start to sail across with Big George. Turns out what Visser Four has done is he's warned the Hessians, German mercenaries essentially, that they're crossing the Delaware, changing history. So now the Hessians are there, and they ambush George and his men and start absolutely bombarding them with fire, and they're getting slaughtered. And this came as a tremendous surprise, this next part. Jake is shot in the head. Just gone. Dead. And we also get the added detail of half his head was gone. How gruesome is that for a 9 to 12-year-old kid reading this book? My favourite character is Jake. What? Half his head's gone? Well, bugger me. What an awesome, awesome, unexpected twist to this story that is. I was like, oh, wow. Wow. Awesome. Not, he's my favourite character. It's not awesome as in, yay, Jake's dead. No, it's not that at all. Because for one thing, I know that he's coming back. So if I didn't know that, I'd be like, what? Hey, what? This isn't right. He falls into the water. Cassie finds him and isn't having a great time. Marco is also screaming and jumping around, but he survives. On the other side of the river, Axe sees the Hessians firing, and he has essentially a split. He's in a split mind. He knows, right, if I kill some of these guys, I'm going to potentially damage history in the future. But he also sees, okay, but those guys weren't supposed to die either, so the future's screwed enough as it is, might as well jump in there. And Tobias has the same thought as well. He's over on that side of the river too, but he's he's demorphed, so he's red-tailed hawk again. But here he has this weird moment where he looks at these people and says, well, why should I kill them? It wasn't their fault that they're doing this killing. It's Cryx, it's the big boss's fault. I don't want to kill these people. And I thought to myself, okay, Tobias, so all the times you've killed when you're just doing the routine Animorph stuff, why wasn't the same principle applied there? I do wonder if it's because these are humans, and usually when they're in the main series, it's Hawkbajir and Taxons. I thought by this point, you know, he'd gotten over that almost shallow point of view. Well, at least for the Hawkbajir anyway. Nobody likes the Taxons. And then they're gone again. I suppose Visser Four thought that his job was done. He'd achieved what he wanted to achieve. And now they're in the middle of the ocean. The Battle of Trafalgar. And each time they zoom forward in time, I'm like, I love this idea. Battle of Trafalgar. Awesome. Admiral Lord Nelson and all that. Cassie is in the water. Now, by this point, they've assumed because of the deal that Jake has died, he's the one to die. And that's that. They shouldn't have to worry too much more. They're still very peeved about it and somewhat perturbed. And Cassie, this is an integral part of the book for me, and also an integral part for the series in general, although a subtle one. Because now the team are without their leader for a good majority of this book. And seeing how the characters react to this is very telling about where they are in their character arcs. And the first one to be affected... Well, the first one to be affected was Rachel, actually. So just rewind a little bit. Once Jake was killed, Rachel suddenly decided to take charge. And it was just attack, attack, attack. Just go for it. Do all the damage you can. Just attack these guys. Which is Rachel's impulsivity coming forward. Impulsiveness. Is impulsivity a word? I'm sure I've used it a few times before. I'm not even sure if it's a word. But I like making up words. Do you know who else made up words? Shakespeare. That's right. Fuck that shit. But now that we've zoomed forward in time again, Cassie's in the water as a dolphin, which is convenient, of course. And she gives up. Because Jake is gone, she just essentially gives up. She gives herself over to the dolphin mind, and she's completely out of action for this particular moment in time. This battle. She's just gone. And it's only moving forward in time later on that stops her from just carrying on like this, essentially. But that's very, very telling about Cassie's character. How she just immediately backs out. It's very telling. True to her character mind, to a certain extent. So I'm not unhappy. I'm not unhappy about this turn of events. I do think it is a flaw on Cassie's part. That we have one major catastrophe and that's it. She's broken. She's gone. It should be a worrying sign, but I don't think she ever tells any of the other Animorphs this, so they're not going to be too bothered about it because they don't know it. Anyway, Battle of Trafalgar. Tobias is flying around, and Visser Four is on this ship. Rachel's there, and I think it's Axe who first finds... Axe and Tobias first find Visser Four. They're trapped in a little bit, and then he comes in, Visser Four kills a bloke, and Marco and Axe follow the blood trails, find him outside. Marco is morphed to grizzly, Axe is morphed to human, and disappears for a bit. We don't see him again for a while. Marco comes up following him as a big gorilla, and he gets tackled by some of the sailors on board this ship. And that leaves Rachel to go after Visser Four, and she sees him going up the rigging. Oop. And she decides, what's a good morph for this? And she chooses chimpanzee, which is a good idea. But she starts following him up this rigging, and then wow again. Wow again. They're in the middle of this gunfight, by the way, the British and the French. And there are cannonballs blasting everywhere, men being blown to smithereens, screaming and crying. And there's a lot of this going on in this book. It's quite tragic. But she is blown in half. She's up there in the rigging, chasing him, and then suddenly she's looking at half her body falling away from her, still hanging onto the rigging, and she's just gone. I don't know how that worked, because if the cannonball hit her head, surely she'd just be immediately just gone. If it hit her lower half, surely her upper half would still be clinging to the rigging and her lower half would go away. But whatever. It's still a very brutal and awesome scene. This book is just exploding into ferocious and destructive action. But I must admit, I love the ways that they off Jake and Rachel in the two scenes that we've described, because it's not all heroics. You know, they don't get stabbed and they lie on the deck, I'm dying. No, just bang in the head or back year and a half gone. Because that's how it is. You know, heroes don't always get a hero's death. That's it. And I like how the animals just wham, wasted, gone. I just appreciate that. I don't want these long drawn out, oh, I was your father all along, death scenes. I always loved you. No, I like bang. Nothing important about your death, mate. Just another fucking casualty, aren't you? I appreciate that style of writing. Once again, Visser Four escapes and zooms forward in time. This time they're in Princeton University. And the animals find it a bit strange. We've had, 3 wars? And now we're in a university. Turns out Visser Four is after Albert Einstein. But funnily enough, he's not there. Why would you assume he's there when you've changed history to the point where, for example, America doesn't exist? So Visser Four has come a scupper here. His plans have been somewhat scuppered. And he misjudged this, I suppose. Bit of a flaw in his plan. Changing history. Yeah, it's just ruined, basically. There are a bunch of university students, and Cassie is there with Tobias. Tobias was the first there, by the way, and he's in his human body walking around pretending to be a student, which doesn't really add up to anything. And Cassie is Dolphin. And this is where she comes back to her senses and thinks, okay, maybe I need to rejoin this fight. Because if it weren't for this, maybe that's it. Cassie would just be gone. Simple as. But because she's a donkey? Where the fuck did donkey come from, me? Why do I do this? Dolphin. I suppose it both starts with do. She's a dolphin. I almost said it again there. And she is on cobblestones, so she has to demorph. And these 3 chaps, I believe it was 3, come up and see her. And they see Cassie coming out of this thing. And they're like, what is this thing going on here? And then one of them calls her a naughty word. A very naughty word. It's not said what the word is, but it's heavily implied that he called her a numpty. And you know what? If I was called a numpty, which I have been on occasion, I get incredibly frustrated to an absurd degree. So I'm not surprised that Cassie basically turns into Rachel for 5 minutes. Jokes aside, It would have made more sense to me, this scene, if Chappie had said the horrible word and Rachel was there and she was the one that morphed and grabbed him and whatever, because that's more in character. And it would be more in character for Cassie to stand back and say, you know, sticks and stones and all that. But yeah, so Cassie is all about principles and all this and what have you. But then as soon as somebody calls her a naughty word, that's it. Fucking clothes off, beat down time. It just seemed a bit strange to me. But, I mean, the guy was put in his place and he probably deserved it. So there you go. These lot tell the Animorphs, who have all just gathered, just walk in, hello everyone, here I am. Oh yeah, and Rachel's alive again, which means that they decide that nobody's going to die because there's already been the one death. Jake's died, so Rachel is there, and they're like, okay, we're all here, apart from Jake, we're all here again. But yeah, these chaps that bumped into Cassie and Tobias say that Einstein isn't here. He's off in Germany, but he's not where he's supposed to be, essentially. Which the Animals conclude will mean that he'll never create the atomic bomb. Hiroshima and all that would probably not happen. But then they disappear into the future again. Where are we now? World War II. There's a brief stint where they travel to the Parthenon, and that's very brief, and that's it. It was a bit strange, but now they're into their final location, which is World War II. And I do World War II because it's not technically, yeah, you get it. It's D-Day. And I remember D-Day most from the movie Saving Private Ryan, which was an awesome, awesome introduction to a movie. And the Animorphs doesn't hold back to a degree, of course, but it describes the sense, the sights, there's even a bit where Axe has come down and he's half demorphed and whatever, he's just a pile of mush, a pile of morphing mush. And there's a human, I don't know why I address him as human, because I'm talking about Axe, but me, just stop, just carry on. There's a guy who's injured, and he's screaming and crying, and a doctor comes along and starts to mend him up. And then the doctor, bullet through the throat, he dies. It's quite reminiscent of the scene in Saving Private Ryan, where these medics are working on this guy, they're furiously trying to get him patched up, trying to get him better, and they're there for a good minute or so, and then the guy on the floor who they're fixing up, just bullet through the head. Done. Gone. And it was very reminiscent of that bit, and I really appreciated that. Whether they had Saving Private Ryan in mind. When was Saving Private Ryan released? I've just looked it up. Saving Private Ryan came out in 1998, and this book came out in May of 1999. So I wouldn't be surprised if the authors watched Saving Private Ryan, and maybe that fueled some of the ideas for this book, because this scene is particularly reminiscent of Saving Private Ryan's first scene, which I think is excellent. And once again, the tension is as high as it tends to get in Animorphs. Excellent. They're searching around for Visser Four while simultaneously trying not to die. And now we see Axe's character being tested without Jake. He's seeing, from his perspective, all so far, most of his experiences have been from the point of view of the Animorphs in California, out of wartime, where everybody's usually getting along to a certain degree. And he's never experienced human warfare, really. But he's seeing all this, all these wars that they've been through, Agincourt, Trafalgar, etc. And now in World War II, he's thinking to himself, wow, I did not expect humans to be this brutal, violent, and he uses words like evil and insane. And he even throws a comment in saying, not even the Yerks would sink as low to do the things that I'm seeing these humans do, which is a very interesting thing for Axe to be thinking in his head. And while he's watching this medic and the doctor, the medic and the doctor, this injured guy and the doctor gets shot. He thinks, why am I here? Why am I helping the humans? This isn't my fight. This World War thing here, why don't I just sit this out? Why am I here? Why am I bothering? And if Jake was there, would he be acting like that? I very much doubt it, because Jake was his prince. How he thought of him as his prince, which gave Axe that duty. Now he doesn't have a prince, and suddenly he sees the people who his allies are, and he's thinking, I don't actually really like these people. Why don't I just step out? He's done a Cassie, but in a not quite so Cassie way. You get my drift. Tobias, on the other hand, is going the opposite direction. He's going the Rachel direction, and he starts to become rather impulsive. They find out that there are a bunch of tanks coming, and they see Visser Four there at the front of one of these this line of tanks. Or they see him in that area. I can't remember, and it wasn't very clear in the book either, whether he's on one of the tanks or on a vehicle, or whether it's like an encampment beside the tanks. I was confused about that when I was reading as well, so I'm just as confused about it now. But I might have just missed something. I might have just lost a bit of concentration while reading, but I'm not going to let it drag this down. Before I carry on, it was Tobias and Cassie, not Tobias and Rachel. So Tobias and Cassie have found that, and they go to the ground. Tobias goes Hork-Bajir again, and Cassie goes Wolf, because you can never fucking morph anything useful. And they jump at him, but they don't quite get it right. And they figure out that Visser Four is in handcuffs. He's been taken prisoner. And they find this out at the last minute. But they get held prisoner, and it turns out it's Germans and French. And they start questioning them and sort of prodding Tobias, and they go, what are you, what are you, what are you, what are you? And then, great part, driver comes up, pops out of his truck, leedle, 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 and it's Hitler. Yes, it's Hitler. There he is, Hitler. There's Hitler. And Tobias is like, oh shit, right, I've got to kill him. Which is a very Rachel thing. I mentioned that he'd gone the opposite direction. He became incredibly impulsive in this part. He basically became like a slightly less Rachel, because he immediately sees Hitler, grabs him, I'm going to kill you. And Cassie's, well, just hold your horses here, Tobias. Remember, this isn't reality anymore. Look, he's just a guy. He's just a guy in this reality. But Tobias is still like, this is Hitler. I don't care about your reasoning. Fuck him. Which I suppose, in real reality, would be absolutely justified. But Cassie raises a good point. Look, he's just a driver. He's not done anything in this reality. Why are we punishing someone who here has done nothing wrong? But Tobias kills Hitler because he gets shot. He gets shot, but because he can't die, he doesn't die. But it means that he does kill Hitler. So down he goes. The others, so Rachel, Marco and Axe, decide, they see this line of tanks coming towards the beach to end the doomsday push. And they decide to get a grenade to disable the head tank, so it would slow them all down. So they find a guy handing out grenades, they go down, and then suddenly the ghosts are just blasted, and they're all dead. It's fucking brutal, and I like how it sticks to that brutality throughout all of this book. But they manage to get one of these grenades, take it over, and drop it into this tank. The tank at the front of the line. Tank blows up. The turret comes off, I believe. Gets blown off and comes down and lands on Visser Four's legs. So he's now trapped. He can't get away. The slug, the Yerk slug, crawls out of John Berryman's head. And gets picked up by, I can't remember which Animorph picked him up. Might have been Tobias. But they're all looking at this Yerk and saying, right, who wants to decide what to do with this? And nobody does, apart from Marco. Now we've looked at the other characters, what's happened to them since Jake is no longer there to keep them all restrained and in control. What's happened to Marco? He hasn't gone the way of Axe and Cassie, stepping out. He hasn't gone for Rachel and Tobias, which is stepping forward. Marco has just become completely cold and calculating. Because all the others are like, I don't really want to deal with this because he's defenseless. He's just a slug now. He can't harm us anymore. What do we do? You'll die of starvation or what have you. Marco just comes in, throws him in the fire. Dumb. Cold, Marco, cold. Ruthless, logical, and cold. Cassie talks to John Berryman, who now is without his yerk, and fucking dust, and he knows he's going to die, and they all know this. They're not going to pretend to make it any easier. But Cassie has an idea, and she asks where his parents met and when. It's quite a clever idea, but I'm not sure if it works. What happens is they go back in time to find John Berryman's parents and make sure that they don't meet each other. Because they've got the time matrix with them, Mrs. Berryman, she wouldn't become... John Berryman's mother sees the time matrix, like, because they're hippies for whatever reason. The groovy man sees this time matrix. And that was enough to stop her meeting Daddy Berryman. And now John Berryman no longer exists, which means that Visser Four never took him as a host and never found the time matrix. Remember at the start of this review where I said there's a flaw here? A little bit of a flaw. That implies that Visser Four would never have found the time matrix if it weren't for John Berryman. I'm not sure that makes sense. I suppose in a way it does, but John Berryman has no link to the time matrix. So why would a different host mean that Visser Four didn't find the time matrix? It's possible. I mean, butterfly effect and all that. But apparently it works. And I think it's just loose enough that I can forgive that and just let it go on. Jake then reappears. The Animorphs are back in their own reality. And it's quite an abrupt ending, which I wasn't a great fan of. It just ends the book. Like 2 pages of wrapping it up. And I thought it deserved maybe a couple of chapters just re-establishing what had happened, what they thought. We never see the Drode or the Elements to Cryok again. They don't appear at all. It's never explained what they do with the time matrix. So it's a bit of an anticlimactic ending and one that leaves a few questions lingering. But that's the end of the book. Wow. Absolutely wow. Now, time travel is a difficult one for any series to really get right. Animorphs has tried on a couple of occasions. It's done all right. But if you look at any form of sci-fi that's tried to tackle the problem of time travel, I think it's impossible, or at least near impossible, to make it flawless and completely logical. I think it's incredibly difficult. So you've got to be quite forgiving, I think, with time travel stories, because there's always going to be a logical problem, because it's such a complicated issue. Our greatest scientists now, in reality, don't really know. So I'm not going to sit here and expect Catherine and Michael to get time travel down to a T. And there are problems that I thought, hold on, that bit doesn't really make sense and what have you. But a lot of it is loose enough that it could be explained in some manner. And it does that a few times. And I think it does it very successfully. I do find it strange. The worst part of it is we know that it's not technically World War II that they go into, because World War II started because of World War I, which was won by the Allied forces, the British, because America, now full credit to America, as much as I hate to admit it, without America, we would have probably lost World War I, and Germany would have taken the British Isles, as far as I'm aware. So if America didn't exist, then World War I would have been drastically different, and you wouldn't have gotten the lead up to World War II, hence why I'm saying this isn't World War II. As far as I'm concerned, considering what happened at the Delaware and Battle of Trafalgar, Britain and America don't exist by the time World War II has come up. So these are weird forces that we haven't heard of. And they aren't Nazis either in this World War II, because it's a different insignia. It's not the Nazis, it's a completely different battle. What irked me a bit is John Berryman, Visser Four, jumped to this part expecting World War II, and it was there. There was a D-Day battle at this precise time and place, despite the fact that it wasn't World War II, which is a mighty, mighty convenience. But that's the worst thing I could find, really. And yeah, time travel, I've got to be a bit more lenient. And the way it pulled this off, this book it's fantastic. It is, no hesitation of giving this a 10 out of 10. Straight up, possibly my favourite Animorphs book. This one, and I did not expect it to be. I really didn't, because my memories of it were fuzzy. But the brutality, this is the most brutal Animorphs book, at least up to this point. And it's ruthless, it's cold. And the part where Jake disappears and we see how the Animorphs react to their leader no longer being there, having no established leader, and how they just diverge and they become uncontrolled and messy. I think it was a very subtle but brilliant way to show how the Animorphs would be without Jake in charge. And I think that's very important to establish. Speaking of Jake, let's give him a leadership score. Considering he's only in for a bit of the book, and in that bit of the book, he had the archer thing where he didn't spot that. He's had a pretty poor performance. That was almost a fatal. Apart from that, he didn't do that much. So I'm going to give him a 4. You know, a low 4 verging on 3. So not great, Jake, but then again, you weren't there for most of the time to make up for that mistake. I just love everything about this book. The writing is superb, the tension is high, the characters are beautifully done for the most part. The one exception being how I thought it should have been Rachel attacking the racist rather than Cassie. I thought that would have made more sense. That's the only time where I thought, oh, the characters are acting a bit off there. But who knows, maybe Cassie she's fine for most things, but then as racism comes along, she's whack. She turns into Rachel. Possible. We've just not seen it before. So long as we maintain consistent with that standard, course D. What else can I say? This thing is, as far as I'm concerned, a work of any art. A monumental, brilliant piece of work. And I shall remember it fondly. The next book, let's hope it's just as good, is The Reunion, book 30, the last in cycle 6. It's a Marco book. And the tagline is, she's back. I wonder who she is. If you like fan fiction, I write fan fiction, and this is mine. So please go read that. There's a link in the description. Also in the description is a link to the Animorphs Discord where we talk all things Animorphs. And remember to stay tuned to this channel for more reviews, more analysis, more theories, eventually once I've read the full series, and also Animorphs movie updates. So please stick around. Thank you very much for watching. This has been a brilliant one. I shall see you soon. Ta-ra.